we've got a lot to talk about. It is 1:01 Eastern time, 10:01 Pacific time. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Justin Ware. I'm co-founder of First Name. And that's about the last you'll hear from me until we get to the questions. I want to let the experts really take it and run with it. And the experts are Emily Etzkorn, fundraising evangelist from VanillaSoft, and Sophia Masick, program manager from First Name. Both are very involved in really this modern direction for these student fundraising programs. And I can tell from watching and experiencing and seeing what happens, they do excellent work. So I'm going to get out of the way. Emily, Sophia, please take it from here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Justin. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. We just have a couple slides. Just give me a thumbs up, Emily, if you're seeing that. Okay.
Yep, all good.
Awesome. Perfect. So, these are short 3 slides. Really just want you to be able to see a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll take these off and just get into our conversation. So we'll just start briefly with introductions. As Justin introed, my name is Sophia Masick. I'm a program manager at First Name, and I come to the table with about 5 years of experience working in the development space, managing students, formerly was a gift officer, and a lot of experience building, programs, both internship experiences, phone-a-thon, you name it, I've probably done a little bit of it. So really excited to be here talking today. First Name is a company that works in the digital development space, really experts in multi-channel fundraising. And so we work with our client partners to create digital, authentic, video-driven engagement centers that ultimately leads to real fundraising and enrollment results. So we're really excited to be partnering with VanillaSoft on a couple clients and hopefully future, development, but we're really excited to talk today. And yeah, Emily, please share a little bit about yourself and VanillaSoft.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. Very great to be here with you guys. Have a blast working with you. So very excited to get into the conversation that we've got today. As Justin mentioned, my name is Emily Etzkorn, and I'm a fundraising evangelist at VanillaSoft. My title really just means that I'm doing a lot in a lot of different areas within fundraising at our company. So we are a software platform that works in this space with higher education and other types of fundraising customers. So our software provides phone calls, emails, texts, and personalized video to be able to be used whether you're working with students in more of an engagement capacity, or perhaps you've got some students and professional staff members working side by side, perhaps maybe working some mid-level giving or leadership annual giving donors as well. So it's very customizable. It's very personalizable, if you will. So there's just a lot of options. And so we're able to work with a lot of different fundraising customers and see the impact that they're making. So again, like Sophia said, lots of opportunities there for kind of even some shared work with some shared customers in common that I know, Sophia, you'll touch on in a little bit here too. So it's been really great to see all of that come together. As far as, my background goes, like you, Sophia, I come from this space too. So I started as a student caller way back when in undergrad, and I worked at my alma mater actually for just about 10 years after graduation, working in the annual giving space. So managing the engagement program, overseeing 2 engagement centers with a bunch of students as well. So this is definitely a space that I've spent a lot of time in, and really happy to be here kind of on this side of the fence as well. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Likewise, I forgot to mention my introduction to development was also as a student caller.
Yeah.
So I feel like most of us start in that pipeline and move our way up.
Definitely.
So, as you might be wondering, what brings VanillaSoft and First Name together? We are, I like to think we're the doers, and VanillaSoft is that software that we can implement and help our clients succeed, specifically in the annual giving space with engagement, outreach. VanillaSoft has so much capability, and we could get into a whole tangent about that. But today we're going to talk about the students. So we are partnering, and we're just really excited to talk about this. So we'll just jump in briefly to the outline of how do you build student fundraisers? Like, what is this conversation going to consist of? So when you walk away, hopefully you'll be able to identify a couple areas under each of these, bullets to take away for you when you're hiring, when you're considering how to grow your talent, we'll start with the importance of building a good team of students. We'll move into, okay, you have these students. What quality should I look for? What's an ideal candidate for, a multi-channel fundraising donor engagement center? We'll talk a little bit about best practices for recruiting and hiring, and then get into training, which is crucial for the success of a program. And then we'll talk a little bit about retention, growing the talent, and making that program evolve past just the beginning. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll just talk a little bit about, the first bullet being, tell us a little bit about the importance of building a good team of students. So obviously, I think this is pretty inherent, but that team of students, they're the boots on the ground. They're the ones doing the work day in, day out, connecting with donors, prospective students, whatever realm you're using VanillaSoft in, they're making that contact. So they're really the foundation and core, which means it's really crucial to have students you trust, who are invested. So, first, I want to just throw this question to Emily. When you think about, for you personally, in your experience, why is it so important to have that trustworthy, crucial team of students?
Absolutely. And I think it's a really timely kind of question to pose too, because I've seen a lot in this space, especially post-pandemic, if you will. We've seen a lot about, do we still keep a program around with students regardless of what it looks like, or is it feasible to keep it going? And I think you and I both share a similar mindset, both working with currently and having worked with students in the past, that there's such a big space for student employees within your fundraising team, and that's not going away. But it is important to make sure that, like you were touching on, it's a quality group of students. So there's a couple of different angles that I think I could take in terms of discussing the importance of having them.
Yeah.
For the first kind of half, looking at just some of the practicalities of having students, they're going to be your best advocates for the university, because obviously a student can relate best to a former student. So when it comes to just bridging a natural connection, that's going to be more impactful than a gift officer calling somebody up that attended a different university or doesn't have a shared similar experience. So those are definitely kind of some of the gimme levels that are pretty obvious, I think. But even thinking about the fact that students need to be able to make money just like anybody else. We're on a college campus. We need to put somebody in the seats to be able to reach out to the alumni and other constituents of the university. Let's use the people that are already around, that already have the capacity to take on a part-time role. It's just a really great use of the resources that are already around. In terms of the quality of your fundraising, again, going back to not only the relationship building, but you have the opportunity to work with people that are going to have a different vantage point than what you have as the professional staff member. They're going to be able to come to you and say, hey, I think this might work better, or I just saw this happen on campus. I think it's really relevant that we talk about it. They're going to be able to bring that vantage point, and by listening to them and taking advantage of what they have to say and share, you're going to make better business decisions to better connect with your constituents, listen to what they're saying as prospective donors even better. And it just seems like it's the right choice when it comes to how are you going to best get to your donors and make that kind of impact. Beyond that, I'd say it's important to have a quality base of students that you're working with to ensure that you're working with not only kind of the best and brightest around, but that you've got a responsible team that you can rely upon. So you're not worried so much about hiring when there's turnover, and you can focus more on doing cooler things with your program, bringing in different kinds of opportunities for your students to work with. So I know we're going to touch on all of that as we go through today, but those are kind of some of the standouts. I don't know what else you have on your list, Sophia, but there's a lot of directions you can go for sure.
Yeah, no, I want to pull out one thing you said that was really impactful, was the feedback student callers will have for your program, and whether it's the script or the cadence that you're rolling out or the way you're approaching young alumni, they're so much more in tune with how the university is changing. And, for one of our clients in one of our scripts, we say, oh, the university has changed so much in the past couple of years, because it has, and they're continually evolving. but we can only throw out the examples we know as staff members, but the students can really provide that very personal testimonial. And, I was on site with VanillaSoft with a client a couple of weeks ago, and I was listening to the students have these super engaging conversations with alumni that had graduated years prior, that the university almost looks completely different, but they were able to find such a important connection because they're both studying law or had studied law and is studying law. And so it's those kind of connections that not only fill up the cup of the alumni or the constituent being called, but also the caller. And perhaps that continues outside of that, and there's a networking potential, or that's just a really special connection for that person, and maybe they're inspired to make a gift from it. So I really have found so much value in the students being invested in the work we're doing, to the point where they're providing me feedback saying, hey, Sophia, I think it would be really cool if we tweaked this in the script, because this is really important to campus right now. This is the movement. This is the energy happening. And I think we need to share that. So I love that comment. And I just wanted to pull it out as, having students relaying that message and it being very authentic to their voice, rather than it being something that just a staff member wrote, because it feels like it should be a piece that goes out to, the external world.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's also worth, I know we got a lot to get through, but you jogged my memory. It is also worth noting that if we remove the student component, we're removing a big chunk of work, frankly, that professional staff doesn't have the ability to get to. You only have so many resources working in this space as it is. But if we remove this first touch component from the students that have the capacity to work in large volumes, that's a really big hole that is going to be very, very difficult to fill. And I think we're seeing that these days too, talking with people that maybe did remove their calling room or their engagement center, and now they're seeing a couple of years in, we knew there would be a dip in numbers, but I don't know if we realized it would be quite this impactful. We need to go back and fill that hole. So yes, you jogged my memory. So thank you for that.
And to wrap that all up, the beauty of VanillaSoft and First Name is that it's multi-channel. It's not limited to one purely calling only, and that's all we're going to do. It's video, it's email, it's text, and it's really authentic engagement. The goal is to feel like you, through the entire experience, had a really genuine, interaction with the university. So super important, especially as we navigate this very digital world now, post-pandemic, hybrid calling, all the things. So why don't we talk a little bit about we're talking about students. What are the qualities when you're looking for that ideal candidate? I would say it's not the same candidate to candidate. Each brings so many different strengths to the table. And I think the more you hire, the more you do interviews, you'll realize that you could have two callers side by side that are just totally different on paper, but really bring a lot of energy, what you need for, a donor engagement team.
Absolutely. Do you want to start? Do you want me to start? I know
I'm happy to talk a little bit. So I know Emily and I both have different experiences having hired students over the years. So we look for different things, but all equally valid and worth bringing up. So, for me, I think in my first couple cadences with VanillaSoft, I needed students to be flexible with me. And so I was really grateful for the team we brought on, because they were so willing to just pivot and provide me feedback. And without their flexibility and just level of dynamic working environment, that we would have been, really struggling. And so I was really grateful for their ability to just be flexible and provide feedback, and knowing that, day to day might not look exactly the same, but they were willing to bring their energy and commit to whatever the task was for that day. So for me, flexibility is super important. And I know that, especially now that we're exploring fully remote calling, hybrid calling, you've got to have a level of trust and, trust in the students to pivot, be flexible, provide feedback. And so for me, that's really crucial.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially what you just said about being coachable. It's hard to say with any certainty, like this is the number one thing that I'm looking for in a candidate, especially because depending on the size of your program, you could be hiring 30 people in one training class, and maybe you do that a few times a semester. If you're working with big volume, there is a little bit of a different approach, volume large versus volume small. And like you said, every candidate is going to be different. And so there isn't a mold that a good student employee fits into. If I had to pick just one quality, I would probably go with trainability. I need somebody that can be coachable or can be trainable, and it's pretty easy to spot after you've been doing it for a while. I'm sure you feel the same way, Sophia. But you can have somebody come in and you can teach them how to use a software. You can teach them to say, you know, in a good student video, you're gonna say this, then you're gonna say this, then you're gonna say this, and then you're gonna hit record here. And when you're done, you're gonna export it to this drive, and then I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
You can teach someone how to do the steps. You can teach somebody even how to follow a script. If we're talking about a more traditional phone call, I can say, start here and then ask this question and then ask this question. But what you can't teach somebody how to do is hold that conversation. There's so much more that goes into it, as I'm sure everybody knows that's watching as well. There's so much more that goes into building these personal connections that you can't teach somebody if they don't inherently have those skills. And so what I'm looking for, or what I was looking for in a student that I was hiring when I was on the other side of the table, is the student in front of me not only willing to learn and to try to improve their skills, but do they just possess that inherent ability to be coachable? Because I think some people say, yeah, I love constructive feedback. I'll totally take it and I'll apply it. And I know that they're trying, but like anything else, some people are a better fit for things than others.
Yeah.
So if you're trainable, if you're really coachable, I can teach you how to click around a software, even if you never remember which result code to choose, like that's fine. But can you be a human being and make that connection with somebody? Because a lot of what we're doing, frankly, is speaking with people that sometimes maybe weren't expecting to hear from us, or maybe we warmed them up with something like a text message or a video first, but even still, they're not your major gift, you know, prospects that have been cultivated over a series of 5 years, very specifically and hyper personally with in-person visits. So it's a different type of touch point. So yeah, waxing on and off, but in some, being trainable is probably the number one thing that I'd look for.
Yeah, and kind of like a second level of that is that personability that they bring to their calls, to their engagement with you as a, you know, with their teammates, with you as a professional, with constituents. I think that's crucial. Personability and also their personality, because their personality will lend to what space of engagement they'll thrive in. Is it on video, or is it maybe just the calls? They thrive on calls, but video is not their thing. Or maybe they're just really great at doing kind of like the data synthesizing piece, and that's what they will thrive in. And I think identifying that obviously in the interview process is crucial. And we'll talk about how to kind of disperse all this information to candidates. But I love that personability piece, because it's what carries all our efforts are only as good as the caller and the call, or the pieces of engagement. So if they're really authentic, students are divulging real facts about their life, about their experience at the university, that will speak volumes. And so, you know, that kind of lends to also people being collaborative and team players, because bringing your authentic personality, being your true self, making it feel as though it's a safe space and someplace they can share genuine, you know, camaraderie, I think only makes the team so much stronger. So I also really look for students' ability to collaborate, partner. And so one of my questions I always ask in interviews is, you know, if you had to pick doing a group project or working solo, like tell me about an experience, you know, because that to me, I really want to know, are they able to work in a team, even if they're only calling by themselves? There's still teamwork to be done. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's a good point too. Obviously, other things that we'll take into consideration when hiring your ideal candidate, but their ability to jump into a group setting, whether the work they're doing is a one-to-one interaction like a phone call, or being a bigger part of a team producing a project or something like that, but their ability to be in those roles, and then use what the work that they're doing to kind of buy back into the bigger picture that what you're working on as well. I think it's important that the students know that they're not coming to work only, and I've got a big caveat coming after this. It's important that the students know they're not coming to work only because they're punching in, punching out, and heading out at the end of shift. They do have to know that there is something bigger they're working at. However, that's something that you can also teach them. So for me, and I don't know necessarily what your experiences have been, Sophia, and you might disagree with me, which is great. Lots of different opinions in this space is how everyone finds the right niche for them. But I don't care as much if somebody comes in and they say, if I ask them, what drew you into this job? Why are you here interviewing today? They might respond in with what they think I want to hear, which is, I'm just so stoked about my university's mission and I'm here to support it. And that's great if that's genuine, but I'm guessing that many of the sophomores and juniors that are there interviewing, that probably wasn't reason number one they wanted to apply. If they come in and someone's like, hey, look, I'll be honest, I joined a fraternity this semester and I need to be able to pay my dues and I need a job. So I'm here, but I've got a great personality and I'm ready to learn more about the university. And I love being a student here and I'm having the time of my life. I can teach that person why fundraising is important and why supporting the university is critical and important to buy into. And this person can learn that from me. And I think that's how you can also build an authentic team of students that actually care about what you're doing rather than the kid that walks in and says, I'm here because I love fundraising.
Yeah.
So that's just something, I don't know, it might just be me, but that's kind of been my take on it as well.
You know, I think maybe like a couple months ago, I would have disagreed with you because I was that kid in college. I was like, I love my university. I love alumni.
Sure.
But I was like one of no one else.
It's a smaller amount sometimes. Yeah.
But I will say what I've seen in one of my student teams is that many of them probably had preconceived notions of what we were doing, right? Calling, like, especially our younger, and our seniors too, they know like the calling happens, right? The traditional stereotypes of phone-a-thon centers, which, we're really trying to move away from that and be really dynamic. I think they've really learned to appreciate the work in a way that you probably wouldn't if you didn't ever interface with it until you were on the other side. So I will say, I think my opinion has changed on that piece, but it's definitely something to be said to see someone start from a place of like, this is just a transaction, to really appreciating the mission and having an affinity to the philanthropy and the efforts. And I know we've got a ton of questions, so I'm going to let Justin jump in here and throw some out at us, and we're happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sophia. We've got a couple questions that are really pertinent to what you're talking about right now around interview questions and how we find those students. How do you really filter for coachability, right? How do you filter for the skills that you need, the video piece, the calling piece? Are there some standard questions that you think really should be asked of all these students during the interviews? What does that process look like? Because I mean, anybody who's hired anyone knows that hiring is critical, and it's very true of this program as well. So what are some good questions? What are some good direction you can provide people, like specifically on what you ask and what you look for to find those really coachable students?
Yeah,
totally.
Well,
do you want to go, Sophia?
Yeah, I'll start. So, with all of our student teams, I think even regardless of their involvement with calling, there's a couple crucial, and it carries across all, kind of workspaces. I think there's some core questions we ask. And one of the first ones for me is, tell me what you love about being a student at your university. I want to know, just like bare minimum, what is their experience? What is their relation to their university? And their answer will tell me a little bit about just who they are. Do they love the school, or are they just kind of like, oh, it's fine. Like, I don't mind it. That will then lend to us understanding, okay, do they really want to be here calling and making, solicitations for their university, or maybe this is something that we're going to coach them on and be, a long-term kind of teaching moment. I'm always curious too. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but what is their interface with, philanthropy or development in the past? Have they ever been working in a, philanthropic role, whether that was volunteering, or were they a Girl Scout? I was a Girl Scout, so I love to always throw that one out there, and I love to hear people say it. Understanding their past experience and any kind of ideas they might have that relate to philanthropy, giving back, monetary donations, engagement, what does that mean to them? So I'm always curious about that. And then I really love asking situational questions. So I'm not a fan of yes or no's, because the interview will be like 10 minutes long and the student will end it and they'll have no idea what this job is. It's just not great for everyone. So I'm asking a lot of times situational questions. Tell me about a time that you didn't understand something and you were owning that project. How did you ask for help? What was your approach to getting up to speed? Really asking those very specific questions. And I think a lot of times students shy away from giving you the meat and potatoes of it. But, I like to dig and say, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about just the A to Z. Like, what were your steps? What was your thought process? I don't know, Emily, do you have an approach when you're interviewing to kind of understand how they think, how they work?
Yeah, absolutely. I will. I'll run through this as fast as we can because I don't want to get too
I know,
far
we
off
have a lot.
base. But I feel real strongly about this. And if anyone's interested, this is my prescriptive approach. Try it out. Don't come for me if it's not quite the right fit. But I'm a big fan of multi-step interview processes. So what I did when I was running my room with students, the application process was first by you called in a hiring hotline number, and it took them to a pre-recorded voice message where they were prompted to leave a voicemail with their name and their university email and their major and a couple of other things like that. And then that was step one. What I was looking for was, can you follow directions and give me the information I needed? So that's kind of weed out process number one. If they qualified to move on, literally, if they left the voicemail with the information I asked for, they got to go to a phone interview. And with that phone interview, they got an email with a mock script, very short one just to run through. And I gave them some instructions. This is how it's going to start. Test number two, can you follow my instructions? And part of those instructions were build a little bit of rapport. They don't know everything, but are they putting in the effort to do it? I had some standard interview questions, but if they passed that, we went to an in-person group interview where we did a presentation on the role, and then we did a group interview portion with 3 different activities. Everything that I was looking for was, can you follow my instructions? Really easy, really basic. I'm not trying to trick anyone. Can you follow my instructions? Can you put in the effort to be collaborative in a group setting? And when I give you an example in the interview, are you rising to the occasion? So nothing I'm asking is about, can you be coachable and can you do this? But by the time they came to the in-person interview, I had a really good idea of what they were capable of. And the in-person interview kind of confirmed the level that they were at. So that would be my very quick run through suggestion for anybody that's looking for some ideas for a hiring process, kind of the weed out approach.
Yeah.
Awesome. Couple more. When it comes to the composition of a team, if we've got video producers, we've got editors, we've got callers, what does that look like? I mean, how many do you really need to be effective with video communication? How many do you think you need to be effective with calling? A lot of the traditional phone programs have 30, 40, 50 students in a call center. Is that the case here? Is it different? What does that look like?
All you, Sophia.
I mean, First Wave's taking a very different approach to engagement centers. So, we lean on the side of, more quality over quantity. I think, Emily, you agree with that too, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you don't want to just hire to fill seats, even if you're hiring for volume, right? Even if
Totally.
you have like 30 students in a room, to be working in both a video capacity and a calling capacity, you want good quality students regardless of the volume. Like, there's turnover in the university space. Students will always come and go, and that happens even on the small teams. Like, it happens. And so the priority is making sure you're finding the right people. So I don't know, for me, I like to leave a couple spots open. Like, I'm not always itching to have a full stack team, because I think if you really put in quality time and training and fostering a good environment, you will get more people throughout the year. There will be turnover, but hopefully you retain that core group and you can fill in those spots. It also leaves room for more talent throughout the year that might pop up as a result of the work you're doing. So great example is one of our clients. Our students have so many friends now asking them, what do you do for work? This is really cool. You make videos, you're on the website a lot. I see you on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, and you're also like always getting paid. How do you do this? And so we have, student referrals that are happening, and hopefully is a great pipeline of current callers, employees that know what it takes to do the work and can refer quality friends, peers that can also kind of come to that level. If you fill your team in the beginning of the year and there's some that might not make it throughout the year because of their, talents or interests or whatever, then you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. So I'm personally a fan of kind of balancing both meeting the quota, filling your room, but also leaving space for that star that might arise throughout the year.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
One more, and then we'll hold the rest of the questions until the end. This one is related to the front end of hiring. Even before the interview, how are we marketing this opportunity, right? Because there are some really valuable skills here around marketing, around video production, around communication, around fundraising, but there's also competition. There are other jobs that pay well. There are other jobs that, are research roles, for example, that might be really attractive for some students. So what's the key to getting to that interview? How are you finding the best candidates in the recruiting process from the front end, just posting the jobs and then going out and actively recruiting?
Yeah. Do you want to start, Sophia? You want me to take this one? What do you want to do?
You go ahead. I talked last.
All right.
Go ahead.
Actually, like you said a minute ago, Sophia, when you're looking at volume, even when you're starting out the hiring process, you're still working with a huge pool of students. So to a certain degree, you're starting at a high volume and working down to whatever your goal number is. Mm-hmm. When you're getting started, try out all the channels that you've got. If you're working in a digital heavy realm, we should be recruiting students from a digital angle. Students are going to be hanging out in that space where we want them to be. But just considering where you're at on a university campus, there's a lot of really natural opportunities built in that still work. Word of mouth is a great one. Once you've got some good students, you can put together a refer a friend program. And if you hire somebody's friend and they work for a set amount of time, they get a bonus, some easy things like that. But putting up posters and flyers in person around campus, like in dorms and rec centers and stuff, that's still a great, or in like lecture halls too, great way to get some foot traffic, so to speak, in the door, because people are still walking around the campuses. So definitely leveraging all of the channels that you can. Going out at the start of the school year with tables or on a quad day, if your university has that hand-to-hand flyering. Some of it feels a little old school, but you do need to diversify your recruitment channels, and then you should be tracking your efforts. So when somebody calls into my hiring hotline, one of the questions that they have to answer on their voicemail is how you heard about the job. So they tell me they heard from a flyer, or they heard about it on quad day, or they're a referral. If you just keep track of that in a spreadsheet, you can start to whittle out which ones work and which ones you never get any traffic from. Fine. So you don't put flyers up in that corner, or you skip something like that altogether because other things work. As long as you're tracking and you're evaluating where your success comes from, I think recruiting and getting the word out is probably one of the easier steps. It's all about having a selection process from there once you've talked the job up enough. And I'll turn it over to you in a second, Sophia. But something that Justin had said as well from the question, definitely including the pertinent information in your advertising materials. So your pay rate, you got to have a competitive pay rate. Do you have a flexible work schedule? Are you doing really cool things like putting things on TikTok or Instagram that's going to appeal to the students that you want to be working for you? Sophia, I know you have a lot more, so I'll turn it over to you, but that's where my brain goes first.
Yeah, no, that was exactly what I was going to say. We are in the business of being a multi-channel, development team and building that. So do the same thing you're doing for external parties as your internal parties, right? Meet them where they are. We want to meet the alums where they are. Not everyone's going to answer a call. So maybe a poster is not going to do it for some students. So but I'm a huge fan of putting together kind of like day in the life vlogs, like other marketing collateral for recruitment. And whether that's a QR code on whatever Instagram post or a TikTok, or it's QR code on your tabling, table, and they can scan that and see a current student employee, take them through a day in the life at their job, right? All those different things will only enhance your program. Just a piece of paper, I feel like, just doesn't cut it anymore. And especially if your program is going to be hybrid or fully remote, which I know some are, you need to be able to kind of meet the students that maybe are hybrid or fully remote, not on a university campus, right? Things are changing. The world is very different than it was 3 years ago. We need to kind of we need to evolve. So that's what we're doing. And we're big fans of making sure that what we're doing, both like externally, is the same internal, making it really dynamic, unique, fresh. It doesn't have to be like a boring paper anymore. It can be really fun and creative. You're also working with students, so they're going to love that. That's what they want. They want to seek that creativity and kind of like outside the box. And I think it only makes your program look better if you're able to do that. I would say
definitely.
Another note is just through the hiring, be thoughtful, take care, and take time to get to know the student. I think as someone who used to, apply to jobs on campus, you can tell when the interviewer's kind of just trying to go through the questions and it's not as engaging. I think it's important to be really transparent, like Emily said, make sure that the information is very clear to the student. I always, in the beginning of interviews, like to reiterate what the job is, what they're applying for. I think a lot of times people just apply for things and don't realize what it is. So just restating all of that, making it really clear. And then I think it's really important to be transparent if someone's not moving ahead in the process. For me, that is super important, both as a professional and as a former student, just understanding what it's going, where you are, how long, when they can expect to hear back from you. That only makes your program stronger, but also keeps a good name for the calling center, the work you're doing. Whereas if they're not hearing back from you and you ghost them, that doesn't feel good, whether you're a student or not. So I'm really like a proponent of making sure that I'm clear, giving a good time frame, and if that changes, communicating that.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. It's really all about leveraging everything that you have possible and keeping it, like you said, realistic expectations, and communication is so important. That transparency aspect is super critical, I think.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit so we talked about the hiring, the recruiting. Now that you have this team, let's say you hire your team of 12 fabulous callers. What does it take to train them? It's a lot. I will say it's a lot to train students, but it's not an end all be all. It's a process. I think I would say, what do they say? It's a marathon, not a sprint. So Emily, if you want to talk to us a little bit about, we've discussed this, but what does it take to train a student fundraiser?
Yeah, marathon, not a sprint is the perfect way to look at it. And it's an ongoing thing. You're not going to be able to put together a training program, run it for 3 shifts and say, now you're all perfect and I have nothing left to teach you. So for me, some of the kind of top of mind best practices that I go towards when we think about training students is putting something together that's consistent. So whatever you use for your first round of students for the semester, you should be using that for all of your rounds of students, or you should be using in the fall and the spring. So you have a blueprint kind of that you can stick to, you update it as needed, but everyone's getting basically the same kind of training so that you know what's working and what needs to be updated. And then you also know that you can move students through in a timely manner so that they can start working and they can start talking with alumni. They can start getting that experience, because so much of their training is really going to happen once they're live making videos or on the phone or sending texts. So you need to be able to I think of training as equipping them with the tools that they need to then go start implementing things. So I have a schedule that I put together for X number of shifts. And on day 1, I'm going to cover this. And on day 2, I'm going to dive into the software and I'm going to cover this. And on day 3, we're going to go through these practice scenarios. And then maybe on day 4, I have like a final call or a final benchmarking event or something. But then I let them know that just because they're live, training doesn't end. So once they go live, I'm monitoring them, I'm coaching them. I have a series of, benchmarks that they need to hit in a set number of time, so that we know that they're progressing, things like that. Whatever it looks like for your individual program, I just think a lot of time should be put into preparing that, so it's not kind of an ad hoc thing. That way the students feel supported. You have a way to evaluate everyone's success and make sure that people are staying on track and they're progressing where they need to. And you also have just a better pulse on the conversations that are happening and the interactions that are occurring with your donors to make sure that those are quality as well, because there's a lot going on all at once.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great summary of pretty much how
kind of in a nutshell.
not to mention that, the training isn't just one time. hopefully you have years of successful
Yes.
student fundraisers. So being able to start with A, and then the next year, the training program is on B, chapter B, right? And you can evolve and grow, but you're going to need to refer back to that. The goal is to never have just one training. And I think it's important as you hire more students to be able to make sure that that training is consistent across the board. And then obviously you're able to track how successful year one's training was. Are year two students doing better, or callers doing better than year one? Maybe we need to revisit and support the year one class a little bit more because year two got a much more thorough training. So I think that's really important. I also think that specifically, you know, with my interfacing with VanillaSoft, when I was learning it as a staff member, I had, you know, 8 hours plus of training over like a month and a half, and doing it is so much easier than watching it on Zoom. Like, it's just, I'm a learn through doing kind of person, I think. And then with a software specifically, I think a lot of people are, right? Because it's the physical act of clicking and having experiences, that muscle memory that comes from just feeling the cadence out. And so for me, I think, yeah, you could train as much as you want in advance on Zoom, in person, but until students experience scenarios and ask questions like, okay, I had this call, the donor said this, what is that result code? Like, I don't know what it is. And so we really need to work through, you know, the kinks before we're able to just launch into a super successful, not slowed down cadence, because it just takes time to learn. So for me, I really don't try to put as much pressure on the pre-learning piece, like provide as much education and context as you can, but the doing is really where that first week or two, those first shifts are so crucial for the like in-person education.
Yeah, all really good points. The more hands-on practice you can give, the better off I think everyone's going to be right off the bat. Really good point.
And I know with one of our clients, GW, who's working with VanillaSoft, our team of students is very curious. And I'm sure this is across the board. Maybe some students are more, you know, there to just do their work and get out. But my students at GW are always asking me really great questions about the context of the calling. And so with our partnership right now, we're focusing a lot on these very intentional segmented cadences. And our students want to know who they're calling. Why are they calling them, right? Like, just reading the script actually doesn't satiate them enough. They want to know like the background understanding of what this effort is. So recently we did a end of fiscal year calling, and it was all live ones. And so that kind of education around who this is, who these contacts are, their alumni, parents, friends, you know, really giving them the foundation of understanding the work they're about to do, I think also helps them feel really supported, rather than kind of going into it and just using what they see on the screen as resources. They get a little bit more of that in-person kind of explanation debrief.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. Also points back to, you hire the right students and you take some care and some time into hiring them, you're going to have more thoughtful students that want to put in that work and that aren't just here just to hit dial or just to meet a certain quota or show up for their 4-hour shift and head back home. So that's where it really all goes back to putting that care and just being really deliberate in the entire process, being careful and deliberate with your recruitment, figuring out which channels work, and then doing the same thing with your hiring process, being careful and deliberate, doing the same thing with training, putting it all together. And I think that leads us into the last piece that we were going to touch on before we run out of time too. So.
Yeah, I know we want to leave room for questions, so we'll be really quick with this part, but we can talk more offline too. So we're going to just talk briefly about retention and growing the talent. So you have these callers, these student employees. Where do you go from here? I think you can gather from what we've said so far is the continued investment in them, meaning that you're getting to know them as both people and employees, making sure obviously you maintain that professionalism, but that doesn't mean you can't have fun, can't have bonding opportunities, and make sure that the team continues to evolve. So I'm a big fan of making sure that there's a lot of celebrating wins, especially those first credit card gifts secured. Like, students love that, and I love that, seeing it. So making sure you're celebrating the wins within your team. I think also it's really crucial to keep developing them as professionals, not only professionals in their space of calling and donor engagement, but providing them with opportunities to learn about skills that maybe aren't directly related to your calling efforts or your engagement efforts.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I know we're coming up on time to leave time for questions. So my 2 cents to add in to everything that you just said, Sophia, is one, doing the building blocks right, I think turns into good student retention. So we know that students need jobs for a variety of reasons. But if we do the building blocks right and we hire the right students and they want to be there and we cultivate them and we show them that we want to help them succeed, it's a better work environment. So they want to stick around more. But also kind of on the other half of that, if you hire a bunch of students just for the sake of hiring in volume and you aren't careful and deliberate, you have students that maybe aren't the best fit for the job, and that's fine. Not everyone can do everything, but firing a bunch of students because they're super underperforming is the worst thing you can do for morale. The same way that you don't want to develop a negative reputation around campus if you ghost people when you're hiring them.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to think through like the full start to finish picture there. And then the only other piece, and I'm so glad you said this, Sophia, celebrating the wins is obviously so important, but recognizing for me that people like to celebrate their wins differently. And so while I did everything that you just talked about, Sophia, and, lots of fun at work and fun opportunities to celebrate this or do that or interact with this or get a break from the calls like that, recognizing that not everybody wants to participate in that. So I made sure that I wasn't putting pressure on somebody if they didn't want to be highlighted or they didn't want to go above and beyond because it wasn't in their nature. Because that's also not something that I like. Like I never wanted to be shouted out as a student caller, but I loved giving mine, shout outs and things like that. So recognizing that some things will work for others and trying to find that balance. But that could be its own webinar topic on its own. So we'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
Sticking with the retention thing to kick off questions here, because a few questions came up around that. And, you both mentioned some pretty specific things. Are there more really concrete, and this is kind of me, I'm kind of riffing off this question. Are there concrete tools and tactics that we just have as part of the program that those are focused on? If we do these things, we'll retain students better? Or, and this is, again, me wondering out loud, because we've had really good success. I mean, a lot of students and a lot of calling programs will be gone after a semester if you're lucky. For first name, I don't know the exact number, but I do know the majority of our students stay with the program, probably until they graduate, right? Or the program transitions or something like that. So how much of it is tools and tactics and just, I don't want to use the word gimmicks. It's not a gimmick, but like something that really kind of, just a list of pizza parties, right? Gift cards, things like that. How much of it is that versus how much of it is this is just a dynamic role? It's really fun being a video influencer for your institution. A lot of students, I mean, Sophie, you talked about how, at GW, friends are saying, how do you get this? This sounds like I constantly see on TikTok and Instagram. How much of it is just the nature of this role being a far more dynamic and exciting role? And how much of it is having to do some of those tools and tactics to really keep people engaged?
I feel like I would say I can't really give it a numeric value, but I would say, people are motivated by finances. So pay is super important. Leadership roles, continued growth, super important. I think like the fun, dynamic, different than any other campus job is absolutely part of it. It's one of a kind, and it's not, you don't see it anywhere else. So you can only get it with this team. That's pretty cool. We're always advocates that this is the best paying job on campus because it requires so much more than is asked of a student typically in a role, I think, from my personal experience. So for me, I don't know if I could say what it is numerically, but I do think that it's crucial to provide adequate pay and also continued pay as they stay with the program. It's really important to honor them for being there for 4 years straight, or if they come back for a 5th year and they're here as a grad student, that's pretty epic. And not only that, but making sure that they move into a leadership role if that's something that's important to them, that they are a captain or a shift lead or whatever it might be, if that's right for them, and making sure that they are taking on some more like buy-in into the work. I think that's really crucial. And I think it doesn't hurt us that it's a pretty cool job when you think about how different it is compared across other campus positions.
I've got Sophia. I'm glad you took that one first because it gave me a chance to organize my order. So thank you. I would say at the very top, I'm gonna go with Sophia. It's student pay. It's pay, and it's 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I probably would have argued differently. Today, it is so expensive to just be around, alive, wandering this earth. Pay. You have to pay. You have to pay the students what they're worth and then some, because we're asking so much of them. Pay is first, but like right under it, I'm going to say it's the enjoyment that they're going to get out of their work. But I'll caveat that by saying it can be really cool, or it could be a little bit more traditional. Maybe they aren't doing videos and putting them on TikTok and Instagram. Yeah. Maybe it's a little more traditional, but it's a good quality environment where they're supported and where it's clear that the people leading the room are walking the walk with them. I think that kind of goes hand in hand. So that's kind of where I'd put those two neck and neck. And then third, maybe a little bit down lower, some of it is just the vibes of the students in the room. If you've just got a really cool group of students that happen to walk in at the right time, I think that just elevates everything else. So it's hard to put it on a prescriptive approach. So I hope that helped the person that asked the question, but that's kind of where I think I sit on that.
Yeah. And I want to also just add the chemistry between the team, like you mentioned, that so, you know, you want to be on a team that is welcoming, fun, etc. But can you be, are these peers getting along together? You know, so when I'm building a team, I think, okay, I have these 12 spots. Will this energy, will they get along? How will they pair up when we send them on a video project and they're on the same shift for calling? Are they going to mesh, and what skills and strengths do they have that can complement one another? So I've loved some of our GW team is friends outside of school or outside of work now, and they see each other on campus and say hi, and they're just in drastically different areas of study. Like they would never interface except for this role, and now they're friends, which I love. I love to see that. So I think that's a really important piece as well, is building the right team personality wise.
That's a really good point, because so many, and we see a lot of our partners actually, where either they come as friends and roommates or something like that, or they become friends because it is, again, you're this very outward, maybe extroverted, or at least outward, you know, sort of person who has that video charisma. They tend to kind of gel in a real way, and that probably helps retention as well. So on the flip side, we don't want to be in the business of firing students ever if we can. It's just not something anyone wants to do. But every once in a while you get to that point. How do you know when it's time to let a student go?
You want me to take that one first, Sophia?
Start with that.
Sure. So also probably on kind of the opposing side, working with large volume and hiring on a high volume, there's probably a better likelihood that you're going to come across some of those situations where somebody might need to be let go. With my experience, it's kind of been a couple of different boats. There's either been some students that have just violated attendance policies. It's like, if you have 3 days off and you go over your days off, we make it very clear you don't get any more. Sorry, now you're done. And that sucks. It sucks, but that's also part of the expectation setting that comes with like helping students learn how to be accountable. So it is what it is, and it's a bummer, but that happens. If there's a student that is underperforming to the point where it is time to terminate them, I think it's really important that you should be seeing this coming from like months and months away. So everyone should be monitored. Everyone should be getting regular check-ins on their performance. It should never be a surprise to somebody that they're doing terribly at their job and they're at risk of being fired. So you can never fire somebody just straight out, right? It's like a professional, job. If you got walked into and you're like, hey, you're done, and you thought things are going great, you can't do that. So if there's somebody that isn't performing well, they need to be getting extra coaching. We need to be able to show that we are putting extra effort into helping them improve, extra hours, extra feedback. And if they're making the effort to improve, that should be taken into consideration as well. Sometimes it means that somebody is like, wow, I suck at this. I don't want to try hard. I'm just going to wait until they fire me. Okay, well, you can find a better opportunity. Sometimes it's a little harder and someone's like, I'm trying really, 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 really hard. And it isn't quite clicking. And in those conversations, they're very unfortunate and they are difficult. But the best thing that I can do to help try to make it a little bit better is to say, look, it's okay that this didn't work out for you. You can go find another role now that you're going to be more successful in, that's a better fit for you. I can't go be a mechanical engineer. I would be fired before I started. It's not the role for me, but this one is. And so it is ultimately going to be better for both parties in the end. But there should be a lot of work put into making sure that they're trying to get some improvement. There should be a clear effort seen before you get to that point of termination.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, like we would in the professional space, make sure it's tracked, make sure there's, you know,
all of that. Yeah.
emails. It's just very transparent. And I think what I've run into a lot with students I've managed is if they are underperforming and you can sense that they're pulling away, it's because they don't want to have the hard conversation first. I think majority of the times, and not every student's super proactive about being transparent about being late or whatever it might be. So you really have to kind of pull it out of them sometimes. But, you know, the students just aren't ready to have that hard conversation. So it's on us as professionals to make sure we're guiding them and offering the space to have just a very, you know, real conversation about if this is right for them, if they're enjoying it. And sometimes it's like pulling teeth, but eventually you'll get it out of the student that they admit they're like, I can't do this anymore. I just didn't know how.
And that's okay. Yeah, for
and
sure.
That's fine. But you know, it's better to start earlier and offer those times for conversations than get 8 months in. And that's the first time you're sitting down for a one-on-one saying, well, you haven't been submitting things on time. What's going on? And they're like, I can't do this anymore. We could have saved you 8 months of chaos and you could have been getting things in on time for classes or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think being just transparent the same way you would if you had someone direct reporting to you in a professional world.
Totally.
All right, one more question here. Expectation setting. And it's a two-part question in two very different directions. So one, well, first of all, it's a new thing, right? So communicating it to students, like how do you really communicate the expectations of the role to students? I know you touched upon that a little bit earlier, but maybe a little bit more into that. But then also internally for the client partners, a lot of times if someone's coming in saying, well, we can replace your phone, and they are looking at, let's say, 2,000 or 3,000 donors, right? And that's what the phone was doing before. So they want to make sure they don't lose 2,000 or 3,000 donors from the old phone program. Well, with this approach, you might get 500 donors over the phone because you're not calling as many people, but you might get another 1,500 or 2,000 more on your giving day. You might get another 1,000 more at the end of the calendar year, another 1,000 more, and pretty soon your program is doing better because everything this touches gets elevated. The video content, the warming, the outreach, the text messaging, the calls, all of those things. So expectations set both ways. How do you set expectations for the student employees before they start? And how do you set expectations internally for this very new truly multi-channel fundraising?
Totally.
Yeah.
So
I'll start. I would just say being really clear and having the conversation more than one time. Don't just have it at the launch of an engagement with students, at the launch of hiring. Have that conversation throughout the year as you continue to look back and reflect on what's been done. Continue to look forward and say, okay, but because we only got 500 donors this year, or because you only got X credit card gifts in the calling year, does not mean that we cannot continue to grow. And so I think with any situation, it could be development, it could be admissions, it could be any space, you need to continually revisit the goal, the mission, the purpose, and keep that in perspective as you view what success looks like. Because I think year one success of anything is not going to be the same thing as year two success. And especially in our engagement with VanillaSoft, and first thing, we know that it takes time to build this multi-channel program. It takes time to establish our student influencers to the donor population, to the constituents. They're going to recognize them in year two. They're not going to recognize them in year one because they're like, who are these students that I keep getting on video and keep calling me? But in, a year, they'll recognize that one student that is, studying international affairs. And I got a call from her last giving day. She's calling me again. It takes time. And I think it's important to just continually reflect on the goal, the vision, the mission.
Definitely. I'll be very quick. I know we're almost out of time. As far as the student side goes, expectation setting just should start early, and it should be very consistent and regular, like
Yeah.
you just said, Sophia. So during the phone interview, you can talk about some expectations for attendance and when shifts are held. And during the in-person interview, you can be talking about generally what a day might look like and where those expectations come into play. And then at the start of the role, you can have a policies and procedures document and outline them. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but like, hey, we expect you to try. We expect you not to leak confidential information. Talking about them regularly. And then even when it comes to things like attendance policies, if you're upfront and you hold people to them, people will be able to kind of keep them in the back of their mind and respect them more. So you don't have students going off over their days off, things like that. I know I'm in a different position, a different role than you are, Sophia, but I'm actually a former VanillaSoft customer myself. And there was a lot of internal expectation setting when we moved from our old provider to VanillaSoft because, yeah, we downsized the number of students and we were starting with a brand new approach, lots of different channels. We knew our results were going to look different. So like you said, Sophia, it's a lot of planning and putting the word out there and reminding people regularly, like, hey, it's going to look different. These are some expected results and this is why, but we're going to see it over the next few years. So keeping it just kind of like a tempered, even, don't forget, we're going to see this over the next few years. I think it's all about that communication.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Emily, that's corner vanilla.
Thank you.
Sophia, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say if anyone wants to chat offline, connect with either of us on LinkedIn.
Totally.
Both of us. And I'm sure, message us if you want to chat about anything
Absolutely.
here or outside. So thank you
Definitely.
everyone for your time. And thanks, Justin, for helping us moderate, and Emily.
Thank you. Thank you guys
Thank
so
you both.
much.
This was awesome. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye,
Have a wonderful
everyone.
holiday weekend.
Yes,
Thanks,
enjoy.
guys. Bye-bye.